Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob, and this is the space and the place where we talk about things important to your soul. I am really excited about today's guest. I just finished his book, and I think that this is the first time that I've read a book that summarized for me my entire belief system. And it just resonated so much with me, and I'm pretty sure it's going to resonate with you. But before we get started, let me read from the back of the book a few things about our guest. So Justin Shaw is a mystical comedian, thought leader, and sorcerer who is passionate about empowering people to reclaim their self-worth and manifest their highest potential. He's a little bit Deepak and a little bit Tupac with a sharp comedic edge. Whoever came up with that, Justin, really was on top of things. He challenges the status quo and empowers people to wake up, unplug, and live their truth. So following a long battle with substance abuse, ADHD, PTSD, depression, and anxiety disorders, he, as a former stand-up comedian, experienced firsthand the redeeming power of source energy in a mind-bending moment of blissful awakening. This led him to study and practice various spiritual teaching from across the globe, as well as gain an ability to access the sea of pure information existing in the quantum field. He's got a new life as a hope dealer, and we're going to get into that. So those of you who are not watching this on YouTube but listening, just know that Sourcery 101 is spelled Sourcery. So it's Sourcery 101, the 13 rungs to a higher elevation of consciousness. So Justin, as we always do on this program, I'm going to ask you to talk about your spiritual journey from childhood until now, and then we'll get into your book.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for the introduction, and awesome to hear you read it and you dug it. That's very cool. I'm glad you kind of got along with the humor. It's very humorous at times too. So I don't know. I wasn't sure if the humor was the pop culture and stuff, but it's good to hear you vibe with it. That's fantastic. So yeah, the spiritual journey. So as a child, I went kind of passively to Sunday school. My parents had me go, but they didn't go. So, it was just kind of like something. It's just like, well, you need to learn some morals or whatever. So I went, but I kind of got turned off. And I had some kind of jerky teachers that were, a little bit controlling, and they would kind of do things like, when we would mouth off or misbehave. I had a Sunday school teacher that would smack my hand, like smack hands, like that's what he did. Like that was like a form of punishment. And it's just like, so this is spirituality. Like this is not something I want to do or continue with. This is garbage. Because just one incident like that, you can have 5 great, teachers and Sunday school teachers. As I kind of passed along the grades, you pass to different teachers and stuff. But you have one of those and it ruins everything. And I had a couple of them. So by the time I was able to say, I don't want to do this anymore. 12 or 13-year-old, you're allowed at that point to say, I'm done. So I said that. And so at that point, I really had never, gained any sort of relationship with anything other than the material world. That's the world I knew. So that's kind of what I went back to, and I grew up in essentially an emotional vacuum. I always call it. There's a lot of pop culture I talk about in the book, and it was like Fight Club in my house. It's the first rule is you don't speak about your feelings, and the second rule is you don't speak about your feelings. So it was like that's what it was like. It was very difficult, and I'm a sensitive person, and I need to talk about stuff, and and I just wasn't allowed, or it was mostly just me and my mom. My dad was around when I was young, but the marriage started to just go to crap. So he started staying away more, and they got a divorce when I was in middle school. So it was really just my siblings were older and moved out. So it was just me and my mom, and we spent a lot of time alone in our rooms. And that's kind of where the movies and pop culture came into my life. That was like, oh, this is my escape from feeling awful all the time. So that was kind of my childhood, that and kind of food a little bit. Um, but then I found drugs and alcohol, and that became my spiritual. That was my God for a while, and that led to my 20s of just spent time on park benches and in rehabs and halfway houses and jails. And I mean, my 20s was a dumpster fire. Like I was kind of a park bench junkie, and would take whatever it was, and I just had no direction and nothing in my life. And um, finally, at the end of my 20s, I said, I can't do this anymore. This is really, really bad. And so I went to a rehab, and that's where the spiritual aspect came in. But it was a Christian kind of faith-based rehab center, and I had a moment in this Bible study where people got around me and they kind of prayed, and they said, pray to Jesus, and kind of got this whole energy thing going. And I kind of had this moment of awakening and healing. Nothing like the second, which I'll get into later, but the main awakening, it was nothing like that. But it was this moment that was like, okay, there is something to this. And in that moment, it was like, okay, I'm feeling better. Like I need whatever it's going to take to get more of this feeling. So I did the AA thing, and went to Christian, the Bible, just a non-denominational Bible church, and it wasn't even like a cult by any means, but it started feeling cultish, and my anxiety, I realized, was worse than it had ever been before, and I really was trying to figure out why, because it was like I'm trying to live this good life, and I'm not. I didn't have that crutch, that pills and alcohol crutch, and so it was just horrible. And I like to say, Christianity, for me, it was this really nice, pretty mansion house that I entered, but it's built on a cracked foundation of fear and judgment. And by the time, I had this awful thing happen in adulthood, and I had several things happen that really brought me to my knees, where this kind of experience is what happened in the midst of this. But my mom was, diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she, her over a period of a year, her brain started to go, and dementia set in, and her body started to shrivel and go. And it was a very traumatic experience seeing that. But what made it even worse was the fact that, I had all these pastors that had told me that because she never went to church and was not a practicing Christian, she was going to hell. So this made my trauma 10 times worse, because instead of being this shepherd to the afterlife that I would be now, I'd be like, Mom, you're going to be out of pain. It's like taking off a tight shoe. It's, you're going to be in such a better place, and you're going to love it, and it's going to be great. But instead of that, I was just mortified and fearful the entire time. I probably was not fun to be around at all. So after she passed, and like I was just really started questioning this whole religion thing. And it wasn't just Christianity, it's just all religion. And I started kind of getting more deeper into the shaman, type of healing and energy healing and meditation, and these things that are taboo in Christianity. And it's like, what's wrong with these things? Like, what I don't understand, like, this is actually making me feel better. These things are actually making me feel better instead of making me feel worse. Because there's no fear and judgment involved with these new concepts. And so I kind of started going that route. So that's kind of been my route. And then of course I've had these experiences in adulthood that we can certainly get into as well. But these kind of awakening moments through periods of true darkness in adulthood. I like to say there's two different types of trauma. There's this there's capital T trauma, which is what I experienced in adulthood, the series of really bad things, starting with my mom's death and ending with a fiance who took off with our infant son and moved across the country, and then cut me out of everything. I haven't seen or talked to him in 2.5 years. So, it was this bookend of capital T trauma stuff, but then there's the lowercase T trauma, which is I went through in childhood, which is just this slow burn kind of neglect, or you're kind of told you're not good enough. I just wasn't told anything. I wasn't given any sort of guidance. Nothing vulnerable was talked about, and that was part of the problem. So that's kind of the spirituality in a nutshell, a little bit.
Okay, that's quite a trip.
Yeah, I was a little long-winded, but
Okay, so parallel to this spiritual journey, you had to make a living somewhere in there, and so how did the stand-up comedy come in? Because I guess a lot of comedy is born out of tragedy, uh, but
Mhm.
how did you end up in that field?
So I moved to California in about 2009 to try the whole comedy thing out because I knew I was funny and I could make people laugh. And I grew up on these movies of the 90s when I was a kid, with Adam Sandler and Chris Farley and Jim Carrey, and just, and the SNL at that time was just unbelievably good. And, I do impersonations and voices and jokes, and The Simpsons was a huge part of my life. At that time, it was just the golden age of The Simpsons. And I mean, just every episode was just full of just smart, witty, funny stuff. So I just started absorbing all that as a kid, because that's the one thing that brought me out of my kind of misery was comedy. So I started absorbing all this comedy and realized I could regurgitate it and make people laugh, and that was a high in itself. So I rode that high before the drugs and alcohol. I rode that high, and I rode it after when I had the drugs and alcohol because I thought it made me more funny, but it really didn't. But I went to California, and my stand-up comedy career was a failure. It was a complete failure. I went and I tried to do stand-up, but I was really high or drunk, and I don't really even remember if I was very funny or not. And it was just some open mics. I never even got paid to do it because I never did it long enough. And once I got sober, I realized that atmosphere just was not something I wanted to be a part of anymore. I mean, it just you're around a lot of drinking, and that it's always in clubs, and you're not going to work until 10 p.m. at night, and I just realized the life of a comedian is just not for me. So I gave up on that when I kind of got sober, and just thought that I can still be funny, but I don't have to go that route of pursuing that. But it's funny because I can now use that. It's coming back around, and I'd love to kind of do tours like comedians, but I'm not just interested in making people laugh anymore. I want to make them think and feel as well. So I can't just go into a comedy club and do that, and start with a meditation and then get into
Yeah.
stand-up philosophy. Like that's not what comedians do. So now I have to create something completely new where I mesh the comedy with the kind of thinking and feeling, and so it's kind of creating something new, but I can still use that comedy, and it is a huge part of my life still.
Yeah. Okay. And you can make your dog laugh, right?
Oh yeah, she thinks I'm hilarious. Yeah.
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 I'm making a reference to Tina, the love of
Tina,
your
yeah.
life, as I understand it. Uh,
Yeah.
okay, so let's take a look at why a book, when a book, how a book, what brought all this on that you said, okay, I've got a book in me and I've got to get this out there.
Yes, yeah. So I believe, everyone has one good book in them. Whether that happens or not, like we'll see. But for me, it happened, and it was like, okay, you know, that book kind of came to me in this moment of that kind of blissful awakening when, I realized that there was this moment. I can only call it a bliss attack. Okay. And this was a drug-free, completely drug-free bliss attack. I was sober for weeks when this happened about 4 years ago. And I call it my near life experience because I wasn't dying or dead. I wasn't even close to that. I wasn't even meditating at the time, but I had taken on meditation and shadow work and some of the things I talk about in the book, and kind of questioning these beliefs I held about myself and about the world. and questioning and just saying, is this, is this good? Is this helpful for me? Like questioning those things. And this moment, it was just this. It was like if you replaced panic with love, and it just overcame me. And it was 3 hours of just this intense, high, ecstatic feeling. And I went and just lied on my bed for 3 hours. And I realized in that moment that I had been in airplane mode my whole life. I think we're all off airplane mode as children, and then society and these beliefs get placed in us, and then we're placed on airplane mode until we're able to turn it off. And a phone perpetually in airplane mode is not living up to its potential. It's kind of useful, but it's not as useful as it could be. So I realized that we're all kind of in airplane mode, and this moment just was intensely, transformative and awakening. And I realized that there is this energetic field that connects everything and every living creature. And I realized essentially that the Force in Star Wars is real. So I call it source energy, but the Force, God, there's tons of different chi, prana. There's a million different names for it, but there is an energy that surrounds us at all times that it's made up of the energy of every living thing on the planet, and it surrounds us and penetrates us and binds the universe together. And that is the quantum field, the unified field. Science calls it dark matter. There's all kinds of names for it, but there's a lot of people. It doesn't get talked about as much, and it's the most important thing we can discuss as humans. So it was in that moment that I realized, like, this is real, and people need to know why isn't this taught in schools? Why aren't we taught about this in the very beginning? Like this is a life-changing thing that could change a lot of lives, and have people like not only get whatever they want and have their dreams come true, but be joyful and happy when their dreams come true. I mean, you can make your dreams come true and not be healed or happy. I mean, that happens all the time. See this in society with all these celebrities that go down for just this dreadful behavior, because they got everything they ever wanted, but they weren't healed, and it didn't make them happy. And so then they turn into tyrants and awful people to deal with. But you can have everything you want and be happy with it. So, but it's using this field of information. And I like to say explaining source energy to someone is like explaining water to a fish. So if you try to explain water to a fish, it's pretty difficult. It's like, well, it's this substance, it's around you, you move through it, you breathe because of it. I mean, if you didn't have it, you wouldn't be here or alive. And that's what source energy is. So the system of becoming a sorcerer is just using that energy. And that's when I kind of knew, and that was like 4 years ago, but I still had a couple years of some incidents that happened and struggle before the last like couple years, when I really started to realize that. And I started started writing the book, but I was still really struggling and knowing of these things that I had to do, just not doing them. And I knew that I had to start doing and living the life that I'm writing about before I could do anything with it. And these last couple years, I've been finally, living that life and writing it and getting out and stuff like that. So yeah, that's where it came from.
Okay, that it came from that, but what did that come from? So if it wasn't drugs and it wasn't alcohol, how did it manifest, or what preceded it that helped it manifest?
Well, a lot of things I write about. One of the, a couple of the big ones that I was doing at that time were, meditation, huge. That was something I never did, and didn't understand why people did it, because, meditation is kind of like going to the gym, and when you first start, your mind might feel like it weighs 300 pounds, and it's going to be a rough first session at the gym. That's how it was with meditation for me. My mind was like my web browser. It was like 19 tabs were open, 3 were frozen, and I had no idea where that music was coming from. Like, it was just like, it was just the trauma I went through is, a life's worth of trauma just has made my mind like impossible to focus or stay still, or, So it's hard in the beginning. It really is. But there is no way for source energy to get through to you if you're constantly in a convergent focus. So there's two types of focus. There's convergent focus and divergent focus. And convergent focus is what we're in most of the day. If you're on your phone, if you're at work, if you're going to pick up the kids, if you're driving, your attention is converged on something worldly. Divergent focus is when you broaden it and kind of take it off of the material world and you broaden your focus. I like to say it's like standing, if you place a blindfold, if you put on a blindfold and you're placed in front of a brick wall and you take the blindfold off, all you're going to see is a blurry shade of red. So that's the kind of convergent focus. If you take a step back, you'll see maybe it's okay, there's a brick. You take another step back, well, all right, so bricks are on top of, they're stacked, and then you take another step back, you realize, okay, this is a wall. And then you go even further back, and maybe you go back, you go way back, and then you realize that this wall is now a part of this magnificent castle, and that's the divergent focus. So that's what you have to create, and you have to create it on a constant. There's more to just meditation. There's some energy work and shadow work that's in there too, but the meditation was the biggest one, and I just kept taking that divergent focus, and my brain started healing and getting better, and I started questioning the shadow that's actually the first, meditation. A call for inaction is the second rung, and that's meditation, but the first one is shadow work. And that's about questioning the things we believe about ourselves, about the world, about other people. You start questioning things that you were told, because there's a lot of stuff in there that may not be true. And I picked 13 rungs. Well, first of all, there's a lot of, I was in AA, and, there are 12 steps and everything. And, moving forward is good, but rungs, moving up, is better, because a bird has a better perspective on things than a worm. So the rungs were, and there's 13 of them, and that kind of gets into the shadow work, because at least here in America, I don't know if it's a worldly thing, but we consider 13 to be extremely unlucky, to the point where there's no 13th floors on any hotels.
Right.
Like, go to a hotel, there's no I mean, there is a 13th floor, but they call it the 14th floor, which is ridiculous. But there's no real reason for that. It's actually not unlucky at all. In tarot, it's associated with death, rebirth, and transformation, and is extremely lucky and associated with the divine. So I looked up that, like, why did this happen? Like, and supposedly, I guess there were 13 people at the Last Supper, and Judas was considered the 13th person, so 13 is unlucky. Like, it makes no sense at all. So it's just crazy superstition stuff that it's not true. So that's kind of there's the very specific reason for choosing that 13. But those two things, along with some other things I kind of mentioned in there, there's a lot to it that enables you to get in the right energy to where you can have this happen too. All of a sudden, your mind and your heart will align, and it's like opening up like a beacon to the universe, and now you have a direct line with the creator of it all, that source energy. So yeah, and that's why I wrote the book, was like, all right, this is a map. It's a map. It's your map to use, whatever. I can't climb Everest for you, but I can be a spiritual Sherpa and show you how to get there. But what a Sherpa does not do is throw you on his back and carry you up to the top. It's your journey, but the map is there, and it works. And that's why I had to get it out there. I mean, this is what I want to leave for people, because it is possible. And everyone has these amazing near-death experiences where it's like, oh, I wish I didn't come back. Like they're out of body. I have not been out of body. I have not experienced that, and I've never been kind of the medium and seeing all these ghosts and things. And I don't really have a lot of paranormal experience, but this changed everything. And that's when it was like, all right, I need to get things in order. And once you're off airplane mode, you can't turn it back on. You can try, which is what I did for a couple of years, which was like try to numb the sensation with drugs and alcohol. You can try to turn it off, but the phone doesn't stop ringing. It's just continues to ring. It just continues to ring, and it's going to annoy you to the point where you have to pick it up. And that's what happened with me. And I'm grateful that it annoyed me, certainly, because I'm in a much better spot. But whenever you cross the river of change, there's a massive undercurrent of discomfort that you have to fight through. And I've fought through it and got on the other side. But it is possible, and it is amazing on the other bank. I can tell you that.
Okay. So you begin with your first rung being shadow work, uh, and you've referenced it a couple times. Could you nail that concept down for the audience? What is shadow work?
Yeah, yeah. So the shadow is kind of a collection of traumas and false beliefs that become a part of us and make us who we are. So the shadow is a side to us. It's why I call myself a little bit Deepak and a little bit Tupac, right? So everyone has two sides. There really are no good and bad people. There's just, people who are in charge of themselves and feed their light wolf, and people that feed their dark wolf. There really is no good and bad people. So it is the side of us that is reactionary. There's a wound happening there, and when it gets pushed, you react, and that's kind of the shadow. And we have to go in and discover what wounds we have from childhood, or some of my beliefs were even from adulthood. Like Christianity was something I kind of started believing in adulthood. So it's not just childhood beliefs that are placed in us; it's just beliefs in general, and also our traumas. Our traumas come back, and that unfortunately the monkey mind, you can a thought of a trauma will pull it back in and make it a reality, like it's happening in front of us. So it is a collection of those two things. And I like to say, the way to handle the shadow is not to you can't get rid of it. So I like to say it's like driving in a car. You have people that the shadow is driving the car. You have people that the shadow is the passenger seat, and then where you want the shadow is in the back seat, because you can't kick it out of the car. And you want to love it. You want to have a love for it. It was created at a time of need, and it's you have to have love for the shadow, but you need to know it's there, and everyone has one. Like if there are people watching this, like I don't have. Well, maybe yours is dormant, but believe me, it's there. So it's people that are the shadow. If the shadow is driving the car, which it was for me in my 20s, that your life is truly a dumpster fire. These are people that can't hold down jobs. Maybe they can't even, the homeless people, their lives are just a complete wreck, and they can't keep it together because their shadow is driving the car. And the shadow's in the passenger seat. It's still too involved in your life. Maybe these are people that we know that, they do fine. They work, and, they live in the house, and but maybe they're not able to hold down relationships, and they're terrible with, any sort of people interaction, or whatever the case may be, and they just isolate, and there's a lot of potential there, but they can't get past their own mind, right? Like so those are the two kind of where you don't want it. You want to move it into the back seat, where you're just kind of checking on it now and then. It's just it's something you can deal with in a healthy way, and there are ways to deal with it. It's good to create like separation from it. So like I said, pop culture fan. In the movie True Romance, Brad Pitt has a small character, side character. His name is Floyd, and essentially he is a stoner that lives on the couch of a more central character, and he doesn't do anything. He doesn't contribute rent money. He doesn't do chores. He does nothing. But the person whose house it is, loves him like a brother, so he just lets him stay. And so that's my shadow. So I name my shadow Floyd, because that's a very appropriate, like Floyd doesn't add a whole lot to my life, but I love him like a brother. And so he's a part of my life, and I have to realize he's there and take care of him. Because I do love him. I don't want to let him, I'm not going to kick him out on the streets and have a fight with him, and that makes things worse.
Yeah.
So, I like to say, the person I think, especially in pop culture, that deals with the shadow the best is Eminem. Like, that's a good way of dealing with his shadow. He calls it, Slim Shady, that is a separate person from the person that he is. He separates himself. He raps about, his thoughts and things that the shadow thinks of, because it's not the person. Like you're not the shadow. You're the awareness of the shadow. So it's, he raps about it, and he says that, and he deals with it in a healthy way. And you notice he doesn't, he's had his hard times, but he is not in the media and getting in trouble and doing all that, because he deals with his shadow in a healthy way now, as opposed to in his 20s when his life was to a dumpster fire with mine, but he got it together. So, that's a good example of, getting it together and dealing with the shadow in a healthy way.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the fact that you bring in a lot of cultural references to make some of these concepts real throughout the book. Uh, and I'm not going to skip to goats yet because that's in the middle of the book. Uh, but looking at
You can
then
do
the
whatever you
next
want.
couple chapters, I felt that these were pretty much related, a call for an action and a surrender to serenity. And
Mm-hmm.
it felt just so natural that one slid into the other conceptually.
Mm-hmm.
So what are those about?
Well, a call for an action is the importance of meditation. So that's, it's
Mhm.
kind of worded fun, and I wanted to make all the rungs like sound kind of cool and a little bit mysterious here and there, but so there's always a call for action. Well, this is a call for inaction. Like just be. If we're constantly, we cannot thrive and have source energy kind of speak through us and help us out when we're constantly a human doing. We have to be a human being. And today's society, I don't see a lot of human beings. I go to the gym and I see people that can't put down the phone in between a set of leg extensions. Like they can't, they're working out while on like Instagram. It's just, I mean, that's crazy. Like we're not meant for that kind of constant stimulation. And there's something, if people resonate with like the phone thing, because it's an addiction. Like if you can't get away from the phone, it means you're not okay with just being. So it might be something to search for people, and meditation is a great place to do that. So that is extremely important part of sorcery. Something I do daily, multiple times a day, and it was a chore at first, but now it's my favorite part of the day. And there's something about I have an app where I do kind of a quick 20 or 30-minute yoga session, and then I sit down for a 30 or 40-minute meditation. And for some reason, stretching the body out and getting it kind of loose, I'm just able to fall right into that sweet spot. So that's something I do twice a day if I have time for it. And then the surrender to serenity, that's an extremely important part. It's about living in acceptance of people, places, and things. Because when we fight these things, it just stands in the way of our own spiritual development. So there's a big kind of emphasis on understanding human behavior in that rung, and it's not to, acceptance is not approval. That's the biggest thing I think I kind of put through. I think I said that on multiple occasions in that, because I want to like hammer it through that, accepting someone's dreadful behavior is not approving it, and they're very different concepts. And once you kind of understand human behavior better, and that, people are just reflections of the environment they were raised, and they can't be anything else if they don't want to be. So
Yeah.
you just see this out there, and it's just understanding people better is what it's about.
Hmm.
So it doesn't affect your own personal growth and development, because otherwise then, it's counterproductive. And also just being accepting of situations as they are, because suffering, we don't necessarily have to suffer. We're going to have pain. That's unavoidable. But suffering comes from the focus on the pain. If you just let the pain be, it's not as bad. It's not as
Yeah.
bad. Suffering is that focus on the pain.
Right. So I'm going to skip through health is wealth just because there's some things that
Self-explanatory.
very obvious there, but
Take care of your body.
yeah. So emotional alchemy. Uh, that that's an intriguing title to a chapter. As you said, you look for ways uh, to intrigue people to read on. Uh, but there's a lot there, and I did want to mention. I wanted to mention this earlier. There's a concept that you weave throughout the chapters, which is both and.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of my favorite concepts in my life, to know that two disparate concepts can exist together and be diametrically opposed and yet both be true. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, maybe you could talk about that a little bit as you get into emotional alchemy. I don't know if that works for you, but
Yeah.
uh,
Oh yeah. No, yeah, it's yeah, the concept of both and. So I remember when someone first told me that it's both and like because I was having a hard time like understanding. I don't remember what it was, but it was like, so which is it? And someone who was deeper than me at the time said it's both and it was like, both hands. What do you mean? Like, I don't. What do you mean both hands? They're like, no, both and it's both and. So many things in the book, the Bible is a classic example of something that can be both helpful and destructive. It is both. So it's just a concept that helps people, with acceptance more, and the world is not black and white. And I know we say that a lot, but people don't really grasp that, I don't think, as much as we should. And that's where both and comes in. It's kind of the, looking at both things can be diametrically opposed, that both things can be true. And our brains don't like that. It's one or the other. This is a bad person or this is a good person. Our brains want to put that into a box and, okay, that person is a bad person, lock that person away. This person is a good person, it's trustworthy. But like, really, and that's that, the shadow, the light wolf, the dark wolf, the shadow and the divine. And that's both and. People are, both the shadow and the divine. So that's kind of where that and yeah, I do weave that in there because there's plenty of opportunities for me to go into both and in the book. So but emotional alchemy, it helps with that too, certainly, because it's, understanding better. And emotional alchemy, we have these base emotions that, a lot of people want to push away, and they're 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 already there. So the best way to use those emotions is to alchemize the energy and create it into something useful, a useful energy. And that's, the best way I can, there's several examples. Pain can be alchemized into motivation. Fear can be alchemized into fascination. There are certain things I kind of say in the book. A big one that I get into is especially, the judgment of other people certainly is a big one, because we tend to want to, we're either like judgmental of other people, or we're jealous of other people, or we're scared of other people, and the best way to kind of combat that is to alchemize that emotion. Mel Robbins, she's great, but she has a book out that's kind of let them theory, and it's kind of, not letting people get to you in that kind of way. And the whole let them theory is good, but what makes it helpful is also what can kind of take away from it, which is it creates distance from you and that person. If instead of you just let them and you let them be, instead get curious. Get curious about both what's going on with them and what's going on in you. If you get curious about it, now instead of let them, almost sounds like, well, screw them, like and we need to understand that we're all part of the same substance. So to create empathy for someone else is the best way to do it. And to do that is to get curious and get curious about what's, what in the world have they been through, that what is going on in their lives that's causing them to act this way, or if you're jealous of someone, like, what kind of traits do they, because jealousy can come out and you can be a jerk to them. Well, you're actually someone who's just respecting a trait that they have. So now search that and say, well, what trait am I missing in my life that I like about theirs, and why am I feeling this way about them? And fear, it's another one. Like, why is this person intimidating to me? What kind of characteristics do they have? And of course, offense. The offended ones are just what's going on in their life that they're being so mean and rude. And boy, I'm sure it's something awful, because they're everyone holds that energy in, and think people take such offense to things people say and do, but rarely does it actually have anything to do with them. So, I say, instead of kind of let them, I say study them. That's what I like to say. And that's alchemizing the emotion. So instead of getting rid of the emotion, you're now turning that emotion into something useful and helpful. So yeah, there's several things in there where I kind of get into situations, and I like using my own kind of anecdotes to emphasize it. But that's emotional alchemy.
Yeah. Okay. So comfort in discomfort, that sounds like another both and here.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. It's being okay with being uncomfortable, and understand that we're going to gravitate towards what's comfortable. But unfortunately, I like to say a sorcerer knows that the comfort zone is a wonderful place, and we all need it, but nothing ever grows there. So the idea is to get uncomfortable at least once a week. Do something that's just like, I don't want to do that. Oh, then you should do it.
Yeah.
So anything that gets uncomfortable, that then you experience growth. So that's the focus on that one.
Yeah. Uh, I guess I guess what hit home for me as an example with that was that my wife wanted to go to a Barry Manilow concert, and I didn't. And I thought, okay. And I was reading this part of your book when when that came up, and I thought, okay, I'll put myself in this discomfort and see what happens. And it ended up I loved it. It was just terrific.
Yeah, and we have to understand, a lot of things, our programming wants to keep things familiar, and people will always gravitate towards what's familiar, and for most, that's comfort. But I mean, even people from nasty situations will, that's the whole battered wife syndrome. Why don't they leave him? Well, because she's been beaten her whole life, and it's uncomfortable not to be beaten because she feels like she deserves it. So, it's being aware. That's the best step for change, is to be aware that we have this gravitation towards comfort in what's familiar.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, attention to intention is a huge concept that can be life changing in and of itself. Uh, so, a couple words about that, and we'll move on to the goats.
Yeah. Intention, obviously, it's a big one. Yeah, I mean, we could be here for days talking about these things, but yeah, intention is just important. It's a manifestation, so you tune into it, and it's being intentional. I mean, that's the most important thing. You have to tell your life, be the narrator of your life, and tell it where it's going to go. When I get to the gym and I just hop on the pull-up bar, maybe I do 12 pull-ups, but if I get up there and say I'm going to do 15, then I do 15. So it's a huge tool in our lives, and we live in a world that suffers intention deficit disorder, or just letting things happen, and that's how the past keeps repeating itself, because we're not being intentional about what we want. We're just letting the past repeat itself. So that's the focus on that one. And then goats, yeah, goats over sheep. That's kind of the acronym that I use, and it's funny because the animal fits it as well. So I when I thought of that, it was just like, oh my gosh, even the animal kind of fits it. But goats, greatest of all time. It gets thrown around all the time now. But that's an acronym, and the first step to kind of be a goat is to understand we live in a world of sheep, and sheep are just want to be told what to do and guided by something outside of them, and don't really want to do any reflective work, or they just want to be told what to do, and they listen to others and just guided, and that's fine for some, but that kind of goat mentality is something I feel kind of a sorcerer needs. Not all goats are sorcerers, but you can't be a sorcerer without that goat mentality of kind of I'm figuring out my own thing.
Yeah.
So it's discernment. It's not like other people. You can't develop an ego and say I know the best and you know nothing. It's having that discernment. That's like, is that something I'm going to take and use, or is that something? And a lot of goats are not very humble, but sorcerers are. But it's that mentality that's like, you might not be right.
Yeah.
And the thing is with society is, 98% of society spends 98% of their free time on crap that does not matter.
Yeah.
And so it's important to understand that when you're following the masses, a lot of times the M is silent. So to understand that and to know that, like, all right, I need to kind of get my goat on. And goats are very funny too, because they're just creatures that they just kind of do their own thing. There's no hurting them. You can't herd them. No, I'm gonna do my own thing. It's the kind of that attitude, and that just fit for me. And so it's that mentality. Anyone that's done something great has had people saying no, you can't do it, and if they listened to them, we wouldn't have any great things that ever happened. So it's extremely important to follow that your goatness.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take a little diversion here because I know we've been going through your rungs one at a time, but something that you just said brought up a thought to me that you have the Sorcerer's Creed right at the beginning of the book.
Yep.
And I thought, how how courageous is that for this author to put the Sorcerer's Creed right there up front rather than at the end of the book, which to me would be more natural, because you take a step by step through these 13 rungs and that would build to the Sorcerer's Creed. But here you've got it up front, which could scare some people away and say, I don't buy into this stuff. What's he talking about? And
Mm-hmm.
because it's there instead of at the end, there isn't time for people to buy into some of these concepts and go, okay, I can buy this creed. All right, I can see it. So, what was it that led you to put it at the beginning rather than at the end?
So that's how things are created, because I mean that's how I've created the whole book, was starting at the end. And it's like starting at the finish line and letting the details of the race fill themselves in. So it was very purposeful, because I didn't when I started the book, saw I didn't know what I was going to write about. I just saw the book being done. I saw it coming on things like this. I'm foreseeing even this being very successful and all kinds of stuff happening. But I started at the end, and everything else has just been filling itself in on the way by starting at the end. Um, and so that's kind of was the idea behind that, was to kind of put everything in there and start at the end. Like a Quentin Tarantino movie, like Pulp Fiction. It starts right away, and it's just like that was the end of the movie, and then they build back up to the very end of the movie and show you how it all got there. So that's very clever filmmaking, and something I really admired from him, and something I've taken. And it is starting at the end.
Yeah.
And I love movies that do that. So I figured it's like, why not take a little risk and start at the end, and then let everything fill its way in on the way in.
I mean, I loved it. And I mean, it just resonated so much with me that I said, okay, I've got to read this. Uh, and I tend to read the last chapter of a book, uh, if it's nonfiction, so that I know where the author's going to take me, and then I'll go back with chapter one and read read the book if I like where it's going. So I really
Mm-hmm.
appreciated your approach, but I just thought this could really scare some people off. So
Yeah, it may. I mean, I don't know, but everything's a risk, right? Like, what's
Oh
life
yeah.
isn't worth living without taking risks. So whatever, we're
Yeah.
just gonna roll with
No, like I
it.
said, I appreciated it. Okay, so follow your bliss, and rose-colored contacts. Those kind of meld into each other there too, I think conceptually. So just a couple thoughts on those.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, follow your bliss. That's the Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. Get on
Hmm.
your own hero's journey. And if you're not familiar with that, that's chapters that rung is all about that. And I also I use kind of the Matrix as my example of the hero's journey and what Neo goes through in his hero's journey. But I also kind of diverge off the Matrix and kind of I get into simulation theory, which I believe is kind of what we're in, and it's not a scary simulation. It's nothing like the Matrix. The Matrix is both truth and fiction. So we're not we're hooked up to machines and AI and all this, but we're in a simulation where love is the primary skill we're supposed to learn. Like in a flight simulator, you're in a non-consequential atmosphere where you're supposed to learn how to fly so that pilots can get into a real airplane and not make mistakes. Well, love is that thing. It is both what we leave here and what we take with us. It is transcends space and time. So I make the best argument I've ever heard for this being a simulation, and I use a lot of video games and modern video games and kind of explain the two and go back and forth. And then rose-colored contacts is that's perspective, because the world happens through us, not to us. So it's important to have the right perspective on things as we go through stuff that happens, because it's just stuff happens. Stuff is going to happen, and if you have the right perspective on it, again, pain is the suffering is caused by the focus on the pain. And if we're able to just go through things and kind of get through them, we'll learn something. And the more the better kind of perspective we have on these things that happen, that the happier we're going to end up being. So that's the focus in that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we're getting down to instinct versus intuition, uh, and that's one of those distinctions I think where both and just sort of doesn't work, because you're either working from your instincts or you're working from your intuition, and there's a definite difference there. So a couple words about that.
Yeah, that's a pretty important one, because there's a big difference, right? Instinct lives in the gut, intuition lives in the heart. And a lot of times people use those words interchangeably, and they're completely different. Um, but there's a lot of intuition training in that, and you can get in touch with essentially you on the other side of the simulation, your higher self. So there is a you, and it is source energy. It is all the same thing. It is a you that can guide you. I like to say it's like Google Maps, right? Like so if I always thought Jesus was such a great teacher because he had these amazing parables. So I tried to use a lot of technology and pop culture parables to explain this thing that we're in. So if you think about Google Maps, like you set your route, okay, you're starting here and it's the end route, and it has your whole path to get there, and it's going to show you how to get there. And we need to have the same faith in our in source as we do in our phones. It's rather pathetic sometimes, because we like if someone tells you to go a different way than Google Maps tells you, you're not going to listen to them, because Google Maps, nope, I'm going to go with Google Maps. So like it will get you there, and you kind of have the faith. All you see is what's in front of your windshield, but Google Apple Maps will get you there. You just have to listen to the prompts, and it will get you the easiest, best way to get there. But also, if you make a wrong turn, Apple, Google Maps will recalculate your route, but you could still get there, but the easier, softer route is the way to go. And Google Maps will also tell you about road closures and speed traps and things like that. And that's the same with intuition, source, energy. And so getting in touch with that intuition and starting to ask questions, it will answer you. It will absolutely answer you. And people just think that that's just thought, and then they run it through their monkey mind, and then it's all useless. So the key is to take 30 days and start asking questions, and the kids clear your mind, and to do some breath work before you ask. But you can ask questions, and the correct answer will come in before you even finish the question. So you can ask it a question, yes or no, and I say in there, they do yes or no questions at first, and it will start talking to you. And it is your Google Maps. It will get you there the easiest, softest route. If you start questioning things, you're going to take a wrong turn, and then you can still get there, but it's going to take you longer, or it's going to be a more obnoxious route. So to get us there that way, and that's the focus of that whole rung, is to get people in touch with their intuition and know the difference when instinct is speaking and when intuition is speaking, and how to know the difference. So it's an important one.
Yeah. Okay, then we hit that chakra life, and
that's just brief. That's just about the importance of the chakras. Like they're a big deal, and they're real. So balancing them, what they're about, and all that stuff, and that's that one.
Yeah. Have you done any energy work around chakras?
Yes, I've seen the shamanistic, and I'd actually like to look into that, more of it, and but I have done the kind of balancing. I mean, you don't even need a shaman to do it. There's some meditations in there that can help kind of balance them, and when they're out of order. But it's important to know where they are, what they do, what they're in charge of, how trauma affects them. And they are energy centers that are very real. So it's important to kind of get to know them, and so that's what that whole rung is about. But I have had chakra work done,
Okay. And then you wrap up with assist leader.
Mm-hmm.
And
yep, and that one's just that's really about. I kind of use basketball term in there as assist leader. I played a lot of basketball, so I kind of use that as some of my favorite players. My favorite player is Steve Nash. I'm from Phoenix, so he was a great scorer, but more people will remember about how he unselfishly helped his teammates to win by being an assist leader. And that's what it's important to help others, not just with acts of kindness, but in their own spiritual journey. And you can kind of take on an apprentice, right? There's the whole sorcerer and apprentice. So you can take on your own apprentice, and kind of you have to be on the lookout for people that actually want help, because you don't want to. It's attraction and not promotion. Especially the sorcery is attraction, not promotion. You don't want to go out trying to change other people, because no one that's not interested in change is going to. It's a useless thing to even try. So, but to be on the lookout for people that are interested in change, and to have a system where you can help them change. It not only helps them, it might seem like you're helping them more, but what's happening is they're establishing these things in your mind because you're teaching them. When you teach them to others, now it's ingraining it into your brain, because like I like to use the whole thing of being like a college. I somehow graduated college when I was at my zeitgeist of insane drug using, but I somehow got a B in college algebra. But if you were to place a formula with both numbers and letters in front of me today, I'd have a better chance of translating Japanese. I don't like so because I have not used it. Strangely enough, I never used college algebra when I graduated. Crazy, but so it's ingraining and making it a part of your life. If I'd gone the route of mathematician or a teacher or something, then I could probably still do college algebra, but I can't, because I never used it. So it is important to constantly be learning it, and teaching it is the best way to ingrain something in your heart and soul. So
well, well, let me get back to your dog, to Tina. Because
we can talk about Tina.
You pretty much wrap up the book with some thoughts from Tina, and I
Mm,
thought that was pretty interesting way to decide that. Okay, here's what makes sense to me right now to leave an audience with, and because this show always invites the guest to leave the audience with some words of wisdom, and knowing that
okay. You want me to do tips from Tina?
this is your last shot at this audience, but it seems to me that the book's full of wisdom, obviously, but Tina's got some good words there.
Okay, I'll read the
Okay.
tips from Tina. Yeah, that's the only way I could think of ending it because she is my world, certainly. Let's see what's that. Okay, so these are tips from my dog that seems to work for her. So, um, one, hang your head out a car window and allow the fresh air and wind in your face to be pure ecstasy. My dad says to only do this if you're a passenger, though, because suffering a decapitation from a car wreck is definitely not living your best life. Two, when loved ones come home, always run to greet them, then sniff them down because they always have a story to tell. Three, give a signal to let others know that they have invaded your territory. Nipping at their noses has always worked for me. Four, run, romp, and play daily. Stop taking things so seriously, because none of us are going to make it out of here alive. Five, eat with passion and stop when you've had enough. Six, avoid biting when a simple growl will do, unless the other person's into that sort of thing. You humans have some strange rituals. Seven, on a warm day, stop to lie on your back in the grass. 8, on a hot day, drink lots of water and lie under a shady tree. Unless you live in Phoenix. Then I advise never leaving the couch. 9, when you're happy, make sure everyone knows it by shaking the entire rear half of your body. When it comes to dancing, that's all my dad has got anyway. 10, if you're scolded, do not buy into do not buy into shame and pout. Run right back and make friends. 11, delight in the simple joy of a long walk. And always take a moment to stop and smell the flowers or another human's pee. Tips from Tina.
Okay, audience, take what you've heard and incorporate it into your life. If it doesn't resonate with you, just put it on a shelf until you're ready to deal with it. And until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.